I never imagined that a single phone call could turn my entire world upside down. That thought echoed in Margaret's mind as she stood quietly at the back of the small church, watching the soft flicker of candles on her late wife's casket. The room smelled faintly of lilies, a comforting yet sorrowful scent, as family members whispered condolences and shared hugs that felt strangely hollow. Margaret, 65, had always considered herself the steady anchor of her family, the one who held everything together with patience and quiet strength. But today, amid the muted sobs and somber music, a sudden vibration in her pocket pulled her attention away from the ceremony. She glanced at her phone and saw an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. Hesitating for a brief moment, she answered, her voice barely above a whisper, "Hello?" On the other end, a firm but urgent voice said, "Margaret, you need to see this. It's important." Her heart skipped a beat as she instinctively recognized the tone of authority. It was Mr. Thompson, the boss of her daughter-in-law, Linda. Confusion swirled through her mind, competing with the grief she was already struggling to process. Margaret had always tried to believe the best in people, especially in her family. Linda, with her bright smile and polished manners, had seemed devoted, yet something in Mr. Thompson's urgency hinted that all was not as it seemed. She slipped out of the church quietly, careful not to draw attention, and found a secluded bench in the courtyard where she could gather her thoughts. The sun was gentle on her face, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions brewing inside her. Margaret's mind raced, replaying memories of small inconsistencies, fleeting moments of unease that she had brushed aside in the name of family harmony. Now, each memory felt significant, pieces of a puzzle she had never realized she was piecing together. The conversation with Mr. Thompson had left her with more questions than answers, but the weight of it was undeniable. She could sense that something crucial was hidden, something that could explain the unspoken tension that had always lurked beneath the surface of her family life. Determined to uncover the truth, Margaret pulled herself together, straightening her back and taking a deep breath. She felt the familiar surge of resilience she had cultivated over decades, a calm yet unwavering determination to confront reality, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. As she walked towards her car, she noticed the quiet suburb around the church, the neat lawns and the echo of children's laughter from a nearby playground. The world seemed to carry on, indifferent to her grief and the mysterious call that had disrupted the solemnity of the day. Yet Margaret felt a strange clarity, as if the chaos of emotion had sharpened her senses, guiding her toward the next steps she must take. With each stride, her mind rehearsed the questions she would need to ask, the conversations she would have, and the courage she would summon to face truths long hidden. She knew that today, what began as a day of mourning might transform into a journey of revelation, where loyalty, trust, and family bonds would be tested in ways she could not yet fully comprehend. Margaret parked her car in the quiet lot behind a small coffee shop not far from the church, a place she had often visited for moments of solitude, and as she stepped out she felt the crisp March air brush against her face, carrying a faint scent of blooming tulips from the nearby gardens. She glanced around cautiously, feeling a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Mr. Thompson had asked her to meet him at a neutral location, and Margaret understood the importance of keeping this meeting discreet, away from prying eyes and whispers that could distort the truth. Inside the coffee shop, the muted hum of conversation and the clatter of cups on saucers created a strangely comforting background as she spotted Mr. Thompson sitting at a corner table, glancing at a tablet screen with an intensity that immediately signaled urgency. As she approached, he stood and offered a polite nod, motioning for her to sit, and she felt the familiar blend of anxiety and curiosity swirl in her chest. "Margaret, thank you for coming so quickly," he began, his tone calm but firm. "I realize the timing is difficult, and I want to be respectful, but there are matters you need to be aware of, matters that could affect your family significantly." Margaret nodded, her hands folded neatly on the table, her mind racing through a mixture of dread and determination. Mr. Thompson handed her the tablet, and as she looked at the documents and emails displayed, a wave of realization and disbelief washed over her. There were correspondences between Linda and certain business associates, financial decisions made without Margaret or her late wife being consulted, and subtle manipulations designed to exclude her from important family decisions. The weight of this revelation pressed down on her, but Margaret reminded herself to stay composed. She had faced challenging situations throughout her life, and while this discovery was deeply unsettling, she was determined to approach it with clarity and intelligence rather than emotion. Mr. Thompson explained the context patiently, providing insights into the interactions he had observed and emphasizing that Margaret had every right to be concerned and to seek transparency. Each detail seemed to illuminate patterns that had previously been invisible, casting a new light on past conversations and family gatherings. Margaret listened intently, making mental notes and quietly asking questions to ensure she fully understood the implications. Her mind was alert, piecing together the puzzle that had been forming for years but which she had only now begun to recognize. After what felt like hours, though in reality it was less than an hour, Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose. She thanked Mr. Thompson sincerely, knowing that this was the beginning of a path toward uncovering the full truth and securing the stability and integrity of her family's affairs. As she stepped back into the sunlight, the world seemed both familiar and changed, carrying the usual sounds of suburban life, the distant barking of a dog, the hum of traffic, the laughter of children, but now with an overlay of acute awareness. Margaret walked deliberately toward her car, each step measured, each thought focused on the next moves she needed to make. She felt the familiar resilience within her, a blend of wisdom and calm assertiveness cultivated over decades, and she knew that facing Linda and the family with the truth would require patience, strategy, and unwavering composure. Margaret allowed herself a brief moment to breathe deeply, appreciating the clarity that came from understanding the situation more fully, and she silently vowed to navigate the challenges ahead with intelligence and dignity, determined to protect her family and uphold the values that had always guided her life. The day, which had begun as a scene of mourning and grief, was now the starting point of a careful investigation into long-hidden truths, and Margaret felt ready to meet whatever revelations awaited her with calm determination and an unwavering sense of purpose. Margaret returned home from the coffee shop, the weight of the information she had received pressing gently yet persistently on her mind, and she felt a quiet determination settle in her chest as she opened the door to her house, noting the familiar creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet and the soft afternoon sunlight filtering through the living room windows. She set her purse down carefully and walked over to the kitchen counter, pouring herself a glass of water and taking a slow sip, allowing her mind to organize the thoughts swirling inside. Every memory of her interactions with Linda over the past few years suddenly took on new significance, each moment and conversation reframed by the revelations Mr. Thompson had shared. Margaret considered the subtle changes in Linda's behavior, the small decisions that had excluded her from important family discussions, and she realized that these were not random or insignificant, but part of a pattern that now demanded attention. Margaret walked to her favorite armchair by the window, the one that overlooked her neatly maintained garden, and sat down, folding her hands in her lap as she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had always prided herself on her patience and her ability to approach problems with reason, and now those qualities were more essential than ever. She made a mental checklist of steps to take, gather documentation, review past financial and family records, and ensure she had a clear understanding of the full scope of the situation before confronting Linda or involving the rest of the family. The afternoon sunlight shifted, casting long shadows across the floor, and Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose as she realized that while the day had begun with grief and mourning, it had transformed into an opportunity for clarity and justice. She thought about her late wife and the life they had built together, and she felt a quiet resolve to protect that legacy with dignity and intelligence. As she made notes in her journal, outlining what she had learned and what questions remained unanswered, Margaret felt a growing sense of confidence in her ability to navigate the coming challenges. The sounds of suburban life outside, the distant hum of cars, children playing in the nearby park, and birds calling from the trees, reminded her that the world continued, indifferent to personal struggles yet full of opportunities for those who approached it with awareness and care. Margaret set the journal aside and reviewed her mental plan once more, imagining the conversations she would need to have, the calm and clear manner in which she would present her findings, and the strategic patience required to see the process through to a fair and thoughtful resolution. She understood that confrontation would not be about anger or blame but about presenting facts, ensuring transparency, and reclaiming the integrity of her family affairs. Each decision she considered was measured, guided by a combination of wisdom and intuition honed over decades, and she felt a sense of quiet empowerment in knowing that she could handle the situation with grace. The day continued, the sun lowering in the sky, and Margaret felt herself preparing to move forward step by step, aware that the journey ahead required both clarity of mind and steadiness of heart. She reminded herself that true strength lay in composure, in the ability to act thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, and in the understanding that protecting her family and the truth could be done with calm assertiveness. With a final deep breath, Margaret rose from the armchair, ready to begin gathering the evidence, preparing for conversations, and moving forward with the careful determination that had always defined her approach to life and its unforeseen challenges. Margaret spent the rest of the afternoon methodically reviewing the documents and emails she had collected, each piece revealing a layer of decisions made without her knowledge, carefully noting dates, amounts, and involved parties in her journal to create a clear timeline that would guide her next steps. The sun shifted lower in the sky, casting a warm golden light through the living room windows, and Margaret felt a sense of calm determination settle over her as she realized that understanding the full scope of what had occurred was the first step toward addressing it responsibly and effectively. She made a list of questions that needed answers, imagining how she would approach each conversation with precision and composure, ensuring that she could present the facts clearly without letting emotion cloud her reasoning. Margaret took a brief pause to enjoy the quiet of her home, noticing the small details that usually went unnoticed, the soft ticking of the kitchen clock, the gentle rustling of the leaves outside, the familiar pattern of the hardwood floor beneath her feet, and she allowed herself a few deep breaths, centering her mind and reinforcing her sense of purpose. Once she felt composed, she returned to her task, reviewing the financial statements, cross-referencing the emails with previous family discussions, and making note of any inconsistencies or unusual decisions that warranted further attention. As the hours passed, Margaret began to see the full picture more clearly, the puzzle pieces starting to fit together in a way that gave her both clarity and confidence in the steps she would take. She considered the impact of each finding not only on her immediate family but also on the broader relationships within the household, realizing that addressing these issues required tact, patience, and a commitment to fairness. Margaret reflected on the values she had always held dear: honesty, transparency, and respect for all family members, and she resolved that any actions she took would honor these principles while also ensuring that her family was treated justly and with integrity. She reviewed the names and roles of everyone involved, thinking carefully about how to approach each conversation, and she began to formulate a strategy that prioritized calm communication and factual presentation over confrontation or emotional reaction. The evening light began to fade, and Margaret found herself appreciating the quiet resolve she had cultivated, understanding that facing difficult truths with grace and intelligence was a strength that would guide her through the days ahead. She prepared herself mentally for the meetings to come, imagining the dialogue, anticipating questions, and rehearsing how she would maintain composure and clarity regardless of how others responded. Each moment spent in reflection strengthened her confidence, and Margaret felt a deep sense of empowerment knowing that she could navigate the unfolding situation thoughtfully and deliberately. By the time night settled over the neighborhood, with streetlights casting soft glows on the familiar streets and the hum of distant traffic filling the quiet air, Margaret felt ready to proceed with the careful and methodical steps she had outlined, confident that with patience, clarity, and intelligence, she could address the challenges before her and protect the integrity of her family's affairs, turning a day of grief into the beginning of a measured and purposeful course of action that would ultimately reveal the truth and uphold the values she held most dear. The next morning, Margaret woke early, the soft light of dawn streaming through her bedroom windows, illuminating the familiar warmth of her home while she sat quietly on the edge of her bed, gathering her thoughts and mentally reviewing the plan she had constructed the previous evening. The events of the past day had left her with a heightened sense of awareness and a steady determination to proceed with clarity and purpose, And she knew that the careful collection of facts and the methodical approach she had outlined would be essential as she began addressing the situation with Linda and the rest of the family. After a brief breakfast of toast and herbal tea, Margaret settled at the kitchen table, spreading out her notes, the printed documents from Mr. Thompson, and her journal, reviewing the timeline of events once more and making sure she had recorded every detail accurately. She reminded herself that the key to handling the unfolding situation was patience, composure, and the ability to communicate clearly, presenting facts in a calm, measured manner while avoiding unnecessary confrontation. As she organized her materials, Margaret reflected on the subtle signs she had overlooked in the past, the small inconsistencies in conversations and financial decisions that now made sense within the broader context of what she had discovered. Each observation, each piece of information, became a thread in the tapestry of understanding that she was weaving, and Margaret felt a growing confidence in her ability to confront the reality of the situation intelligently and effectively. The sun rose higher, casting a warm glow over the garden outside, and Margaret took a few moments to step outside, inhaling the crisp morning air, feeling grounded and centered, and allowing the serenity of her surroundings to reinforce her focus. She knew that any discussions with Linda would need to be approached thoughtfully, with careful phrasing and a commitment to transparency, ensuring that the emphasis remained on facts rather than emotion, and that the conversation would guide the family toward clarity and understanding rather than discord. Margaret imagined the dialogue she would have, rehearsing the questions she would ask and the points she needed to address, each one designed to illuminate the truth while maintaining dignity and respect for all involved. The morning continued with Margaret meticulously reviewing financial statements, past family records, and any correspondence that shed light on decisions that had been made without her knowledge, noting each irregularity carefully and considering how it fit into the larger picture. She realized that patience was crucial, that taking the time to gather and understand the facts fully would ensure that any confrontation would be informed, strategic, and effective. By mid-morning, Margaret felt a quiet readiness settling over her, a calm assurance that she was prepared to navigate the challenging conversations ahead with intelligence and composure. She reflected on the values that had guided her life, honesty, integrity, and fairness, and resolved that her actions would align with those principles, ensuring that the outcome would be just and thoughtful. As the morning light shifted toward noon, Margaret felt a sense of determination solidify within her, knowing that today marked the beginning of a careful process to uncover the truth, address the discrepancies she had discovered, and guide her family toward transparency and accountability. With each step, each thought carefully considered, Margaret prepared to move forward with the calm, methodical approach that had always defined her, ready to face the revelations to come with clarity, patience, and unwavering composure. Margaret spent the early afternoon reviewing the sequence of emails and financial records she had meticulously organized, the warm light from the living room windows casting a soft glow over the papers spread across the table, and she felt a quiet focus settle over her as she examined each detail with care, noting discrepancies and confirming facts to ensure that she had a complete understanding before taking any further steps. Each message and document revealed small but significant decisions made without her knowledge, and as Margaret traced the connections between them, a clear pattern emerged, illustrating the subtle ways in which information and control had been shifted away from her, intentionally or otherwise. She paused briefly, sipping from a cup of chamomile tea, allowing herself a moment to reflect on the implications and to center her thoughts before continuing. Margaret understood that patience was essential, that moving too quickly without a comprehensive understanding could result in missteps or misunderstandings, and she committed herself to proceeding with deliberate care. She reviewed her journal notes, ensuring that her timeline was accurate and that each observation was clearly recorded, knowing that thorough preparation would allow her to communicate confidently and effectively with Linda and the family. The house was quiet, the only sounds the distant hum of traffic from the street and the gentle chirping of birds outside, creating an atmosphere conducive to thoughtful analysis. Margaret felt a growing sense of clarity as she considered the most strategic and fair way to address the situation, balancing the need for transparency with a respectful approach that would maintain dignity and composure. She began to outline the key points she would need to discuss, imagining how to phrase each question and statement in a manner that was clear and factual, avoiding unnecessary emotion or judgment, and focusing on uncovering the truth while fostering understanding. As the afternoon progressed, Margaret reflected on her role within the family, the years of guidance, support, and care she had provided, and she felt a renewed commitment to ensuring that her actions would protect both the integrity of the household and the well-being of everyone involved. She reviewed her plan one final time, considering contingencies and preparing herself for potential reactions, knowing that composure, patience, and clarity were her most powerful tools in navigating the unfolding situation. The sun moved lower in the sky, casting longer shadows across the living room floor, and Margaret felt a sense of readiness settle over her, a calm determination that she could manage the upcoming conversations with wisdom and care. She recognized that today marked a pivotal point in uncovering the truth, that her careful preparation would allow her to address the issues methodically, and that by proceeding with intelligence and composure, she could guide her family toward understanding and resolution. With each passing moment, Margaret's confidence in her ability to act thoughtfully and deliberately grew stronger, and she allowed herself to feel a sense of quiet empowerment, knowing that she was fully equipped to navigate the complexities ahead with grace, patience, and unwavering clarity. Margaret finally felt it was time to face the situation directly, knowing that careful preparation and a calm approach would be essential in maintaining clarity and composure during what could be a tense conversation. She made her way to the family living room, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, casting gentle patterns across the carpet as she considered the points she needed to cover and the order in which she would present them. Margaret reminded herself that this meeting was not about confrontation or assigning blame but about transparency, clarity, and ensuring that the family understood the decisions and actions that had been taken. Linda was seated on the sofa, her posture composed but slightly tense, and Margaret acknowledged the small shift in the room's atmosphere, noting the subtle signs of apprehension while keeping her own expressions measured and calm. Margaret began the conversation by expressing her gratitude for the time they were taking together, emphasizing her intention to discuss important matters in a spirit of understanding and openness. She carefully guided the discussion toward the financial and administrative decisions that had been made without her knowledge, presenting the information she had gathered in a clear, factual manner while allowing pauses for questions and reflections. Linda listened attentively, occasionally nodding, and Margaret noticed the flicker of recognition and concern on her face, indicating that the impact of the information was beginning to settle in. Margaret maintained a steady pace, ensuring that each point was clearly articulated and supported by evidence, and she refrained from inserting personal judgments or emotional commentary, understanding that her goal was to illuminate the truth and foster comprehension rather than provoke defensiveness. As the conversation progressed, Margaret skillfully navigated questions and clarifications, responding with measured explanations that reinforced the accuracy and importance of the facts being shared. She observed Linda's reactions carefully, noting both verbal and nonverbal cues, and adjusted her approach as necessary to maintain a constructive and respectful tone. The room remained calm, a testament to Margaret's deliberate and thoughtful communication style, and gradually, a sense of understanding began to emerge, with Linda acknowledging the discrepancies and offering her own perspective on the decisions that had been made. Margaret listened attentively, balancing empathy with the necessity of clarity, and ensured that the discussion remained focused on the information and its implications rather than personal emotions or past grievances. By the end of the meeting, Margaret felt a quiet sense of accomplishment and relief, recognizing that the careful preparation, composure, and thoughtful articulation had created an environment in which truth and understanding could be shared openly. She summarized the key points, reiterated the importance of transparency and accountability, and outlined the next steps in a manner that was clear, respectful, and forward-looking. Linda expressed appreciation for Margaret's approach and acknowledged her commitment to fairness and clarity, and for the first time in a long while, the atmosphere in the room was one of mutual recognition and calm understanding. Margaret left the living room feeling a renewed sense of confidence and empowerment, knowing that the conversation had been handled with intelligence, patience, and composure, and she reflected on the value of preparation, thoughtful communication, and maintaining dignity in navigating complex family matters. As she moved through the house, observing the familiar surroundings bathed in the warm light of late afternoon, Margaret felt a deep sense of readiness for the days ahead, confident that her careful and measured approach had set the stage for clarity, resolution, and the preservation of trust and integrity within her family. As the evening settled over Margaret's neighborhood, the warm glow of streetlights began to illuminate the quiet streets outside, and inside her home, she felt a sense of calm focus as she reviewed her plan for the next steps with a careful and methodical approach. The conversation with Linda earlier had set a constructive tone, and Margaret understood that maintaining clarity, patience, and composure would be crucial as she continued to navigate the unfolding family matters. She sat at the dining room table, spreading out the notes, documents, and journal entries she had meticulously organized, carefully cross-referencing dates, emails, and decisions to ensure that she had a complete understanding of the situation. Margaret reflected on the subtle patterns she had observed over the past months, the choices and communications that had previously seemed inconsequential, and she realized that viewing them within the broader context revealed a thoughtful, though sometimes misguided, strategy on Linda's part. Margaret allowed herself a moment to breathe, appreciating the clarity that came from analyzing the information in a calm and deliberate manner, and she recognized the importance of approaching the next phase with the same intelligence and composure that had guided her so far. As she outlined the key discussion points and organized her approach for addressing any remaining questions, Margaret considered the best way to balance transparency with tact, ensuring that her family would understand the facts while avoiding unnecessary tension. The quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustling of leaves outside created a serene environment in which Margaret could focus fully on her strategy, mentally rehearsing how to present the information and anticipate responses with careful thought and measured patience. She reminded herself that the ultimate goal was not confrontation, but the establishment of clarity, trust, and mutual understanding, and that each step taken with composure would reinforce her credibility and maintain the dignity of the conversation. Margaret imagined potential questions and scenarios, visualizing how she could respond with factual clarity, guiding the dialogue toward resolution and understanding while remaining calm and attentive to the needs and reactions of everyone involved. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the soft twilight light blended with the interior lamps, creating a comforting warmth as Margaret finalized her preparations for the following day, confident in her ability to navigate the complex dynamics with intelligence and poise. She reflected on the strength she had cultivated over the years, the wisdom gained from managing family responsibilities and personal challenges, and she felt a quiet sense of empowerment knowing that she could approach the next conversations with strategic clarity. With each detail reviewed and each plan carefully considered, Margaret recognized that the careful combination of patience, insight, and calm communication would allow her to address the situation effectively, guiding her family toward transparency and thoughtful resolution. She took one last moment to center herself, appreciating the serenity of the evening and the confidence she had built in her ability to handle the challenges ahead with dignity, foresight, and unwavering composure, ready to continue on a path of clarity, understanding, and intelligent action. Margaret spent the morning reviewing the progress of the discussions from the previous day, feeling a sense of quiet accomplishment as she noted the clarity and understanding that had begun to take shape within her family. She walked through her home, observing the familiar spaces bathed in soft daylight, reflecting on how her careful and methodical approach had allowed her to maintain composure while presenting the facts and addressing the questions that had arisen. Each conversation had been guided by patience, clarity, and respect, allowing her family members to absorb the information fully and respond thoughtfully. Margaret reviewed her journal once more, confirming that the timeline she had created and the notes she had taken accurately represented the sequence of events, and she felt confident that her attention to detail had provided a solid foundation for ongoing discussions and decisions. She thought about the subtle shifts she had noticed in family dynamics, the way understanding and transparency had begun to replace confusion and uncertainty, and she appreciated the quiet strength that careful preparation had afforded her in navigating these challenges. As the afternoon progressed, Margaret focused on reinforcing the outcomes of the conversations by following up on any remaining questions and ensuring that everyone had a clear understanding of the next steps, all conducted with calm composure and clear communication. The sunlight moved gently across the rooms, casting a warm glow on the furniture and the small personal items that marked her home as a space of comfort and stability, and Margaret allowed herself a moment to reflect on the importance of maintaining both clarity and empathy in addressing delicate family matters. She recognized that the careful balance of transparency, patience, and thoughtful dialogue had strengthened not only her own confidence but also the cohesion and trust within her family. Each step she had taken, from collecting and analyzing information to presenting it thoughtfully and responding to inquiries with intelligence and composure, had contributed to a sense of resolution and understanding that reassured her that the family could move forward with clarity. Margaret felt a quiet pride in the way she had managed the unfolding situation, using reason and strategic planning to navigate complexities while ensuring that respect, dignity, and fairness guided each interaction. She understood that the process was ongoing, that continued attention and clear communication would be necessary to maintain trust and understanding, but she felt prepared to handle these responsibilities with the same calm, measured approach that had guided her from the outset. As the day drew to a close, Margaret allowed herself to appreciate the strength and wisdom that had carried her through the challenges, confident that the thoughtful and deliberate steps she had taken had set the stage for lasting clarity and mutual respect within her family. With a sense of calm empowerment, she looked ahead to the future, ready to continue fostering understanding, transparency, and thoughtful action in every aspect of her family life.